What happens when governments grow beyond their means? Canada's public sector, for example, is on a spending spree, and it always has been. With government agencies bloating, inefficiencies running rampant, and public sector wages skyrocketing, taxpayers are being squeezed dry. How much longer can we afford this unchecked expansion before it destroys the economy completely? While the public sector balloons, Canada's welfare state continues to grow as millions now rely on employment insurance and food banks for basic essentials. Today, we examine consequences of unchecked bureaucracy in the public sector, along with taking a look at the growing welfare state. From overstaffed public works projects, like Milton Friedman once famously observed, to Canada's alarming job creation stats, where 4 out of 5 new jobs are government roles, the evidence of inefficiency is piling up. What does this mean for the future? Are we looking at a dystopian state where every citizen is either collecting employment insurance or is employed by the government? Are we looking at a dystopian state where every citizen is either unemployed, disabled, or looking for a role in the public sector? Is there a way back from this spiral? Or are we stuck funding this bloated machine? Economic volatility can be impacted by a number of factors, but these impacts are truly amplified when our government agencies are pumped with taxpayer dollars and provide no value. Canada's public sector is filled with redundancies, zero empathy for tax-paying Canadians who have been visibly seeing the decline in essentially every city across the country. We've recently even seen new lows, with Service Ontario employees playing important roles in criminal rings. And with DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency in the US already taking swift action, Canada is also in desperate need of an audit, a real audit. And with the growing welfare class, the future truly looks bleak. What's the hidden cost of Canada's welfare system that every taxpayer is footing the bill for, in addition to this bloated public sector that we're already discussing today? What are your taxes covering if 911 isn't answering your calls and you can't get an officer to arrive in the middle of a robbery? While the public sector grows, the private sector deflates, and the natural dependency of North Americans continues to grow exponentially year to year. It is a part of nature to become dependent on handouts, and we continue to see these increases in unemployment insurance, social assistance, and disability insurance. Milton Friedman, in an iconic video, exposed the inefficiency of public-funded projects, pointing out that the redundancy of labor has always existed in government works. He noted famously, if you hired half the workers to dig holes and the other half to fill them, you'd achieve the same result as many government projects. His broader critique argued for the elimination of unnecessary government agencies, such as the Department of Education. Canada's ever-growing public sector expansion. A recent stat revealed that 80% of jobs created in Canada over the last few years have been government roles. While private sector growth stalls, taxpayers shoulder the costs of continuous artificial job creation. This trend raises serious concerns about sustainability. Even more concerning when government-operated services continues to be the gold standard in poor service. Wages in the public sector continue to rise while service levels keep reducing. Is the Canadian government simply creating jobs to manage the inefficiencies of this already overgrown system? What would it take for Canada to require its own Department of Government Efficiency? Global comparisons. The UK and its public sector expansion. The UK has faced similar challenges with public sector expansion, where nearly 1 in 4 people are employed by the state. While this model was designed to cushion the workforce, it has truly led to inefficiencies and unsustainable costs to taxpayers. The British government has struggled to reduce bloated agencies like the NHS and their education departments, showing how heavy reliance on public sector jobs can truly stifle economic growth. Also, similar to the US and Canada, we're also seeing a concerning growth in the number of UK citizens on social assistance or long-term sickness. Public sector services represent the pinnacle of bad customer service. In recent Canadian news, there's now an increase in criminal operations being directly linked to public employees. We have salaried employees in the public sector paid by taxpayers, and this is converting into sophisticated organized rings. How long can Canada and the UK maintain these public sector heavy structures before it finally cracks under its own weight? Are Canada and the UK heading down a similar path of unsustainable growth? And where does it end? Canada's deflating private sector. Small businesses in Canada cannot thrive, and new businesses have truly no incentive. With wages increasing, rising inflation, competing with big corporations, and competing with foreign worker programs. While Canadian small businesses continue to suffer, large Canadian corps require bailouts and subsidies, and at times even requiring government ownership to survive. Taxpayer dollars fund bailouts and subsidies for these large Canadian corps, and all the while they find new all-time lows in customer service standards, paying more for less. The growing welfare class in Canada. In recent years, Canada has witnessed an alarming rise in the numbers on homelessness, on Canadians relying on social assistance programs, and on food banks. This trend has only deepened since the pandemic, exposing cracks in the nation's economy. While inflation and the cost of living continue to climb, stagnant wages for low-income workers and job opportunities dwindling has made it nearly impossible for many Canadians to make ends meet. During the height of the pandemic, nearly 8.9 million Canadians applied for emergency benefits, including the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Although temporary, this surge in dependency reflected a much broader economic reality that Canada was already heading towards a growing welfare class that was continuing to grow exponentially well before the pandemic. By 2023, food bank usage in Canada reached a record high, with over 1.9 million visits to food banks in March of 2023 alone, a 32% increase from 4 years ago. Recent stats have shown 1 in 4 visiting a food bank is employed and holding a current job, which highlights an even more troubling reality that many of our struggling Canadians hold jobs and still cannot afford basic necessities. Employment insurance claims have surged as more and more workers face job insecurity or layoffs. At the end of 2023, approximately 1.2 million Canadians were receiving EI benefits each month. This represents a 23% increase compared to pre-pandemic levels. Again, one thing is very clear. The pandemic accelerated issues in Canada and the struggles with the welfare class, but the seeds were sown long before. With rising housing costs, skyrocketing grocery bills, and a government that continues to rely on temporary fixes rather than sustainable solutions, Canada is at risk of normalizing this growing dependence on the welfare system. Instead of focusing on the private sector growth and the needs of everyday Canadians, we continue to stray away from basic needs and continue to bolster the public sector state media. In the context of government-funded media outlets, the question arises, how can you truly take pride in Canadian state-run media, regardless of which political party is in power, when the narrative is controlled by the government, funneled to the media outlets, who are disguised as the voice of the people? Consider the CBC, Canada's national broadcaster, which has long been a staple of Canadian media. Yet with over $1.2 billion in annual funding, almost solely from the federal government, it is absolutely unable to deliver unbiased news or anything remotely entertaining. Critics argue that such heavy reliance on taxpayer dollars has compromised its journalistic independence, skewing its reporting from unbiased journalism to government propaganda. While some defend the CBC for its role in upholding Canada's multiculturalism and showcasing Canadian heritage and talent, others have always seen it simply as a tool for government programming and messaging. The issue extends beyond the CBC. Various media outlets in Canada have been receiving financial aid from the government. Most notably the Toronto Star, which has received millions in taxpayer funds as part of the 2019 media bailout program. These subsidies, while aimed at saving struggling newsrooms, also raises alarms about media bias and potential conflicts of interest. It must be understood that the media truly cannot be unbiased and serve the public interest and hold the government accountable when they're depending on the very funding from that government. All of the Canadian news outlets, along with CBC, have heavily leaned liberal over the last several years, perfectly aligning with the federal government that's been in power. We should slowly start to see that window shift as we see a transition in power in the federal government. The needle will start to shift, and with the media already making critiques of the current government in the past year, they may already be in preparation for new leadership. The shift is already gradually underway. The federal government's subsidies to media outlets contribute to a concerning blurring of lines between independent journalism and government communication. And this is regardless of the political party in power. It's compounded by a growing trend in many countries, not just in Canada, where government-backed media is not understood by the majority of citizens. The reality is that state-funded media, irrespective of political party, can never fully escape the bias that it will face. Their coverage will always be influenced by their reliance on the funding. And those but explicitly listed as government funded will continue to allow their message to be sold to the highest bidder. How can Canadians remain proud of a media system that relies so heavily on your taxpayer dollars and have essentially at the same time turned their back on their core audience? As we conclude on the entire topic, let's reflect again. What are the consequences of a government that keeps growing, the taxpayers keep paying, a private sector that keeps dwindling, and affordability that continues to be unsustainable? The time for a hard look at spending is now, and it's regardless of which political party is in power. Canada has been endlessly digging and filling its own holes over the last few years, and it's time for a change. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are Friedman's solutions relevant for today? Do you agree with Milton Friedman's comments about public sector bloat? Do you feel like Canada could use a Doge of itself? Or is the Doge in the US a whole lot of fluff? Comment, like, subscribe. Thank you very much. Love you all.